Mr. Ronaldo, Suey.
George Pickens. 7-point game.
Inshallah.
Cristiano Ronaldo has become a worldwide phenomenon. Ronaldo is a true icon, a symbol for many. Why do we relate to someone like that? And what does that reflect? As an icon, Ronaldo resembles something more than himself. He is not a person, but a hero of the modern age, similar to the heroes of ancient times, such as Achilles, King Arthur, or Krishna. Ronaldo is such a hero that every kid wants to be him, wants to copy him. But why are we always looking for heroes? What do they represent? And how are footballers heroes to begin with? And is it for this reason that we care so much about football? Carl Jung gave us the tools to think about this, with his study of archetypes. Archetypes are coherent forms that structure our unconscious, that allow us to recognize the world. Almost all our favorite fictional characters represent archetypes. Think of heroes like Luke Skywalker, or Frodo, or Goku, or old wise sages like Yoda, or Jiraiya from Naruto, or Gandalf, or Dumbledore. Or think about tricksters like Loki, or the genie from Aladdin, or Han Solo. Each of these different types represent coherent archetypes, specific forms that work together that make sense in a story. Do footballers capture our imagination because they represent archetypes? I think so, and in this video I will explain why football captures our imagination so much, and I will describe football as a battlefield of archetypes. Why do we care about stories? Jung would argue that it's because of how they explore archetypes. And these archetypes directly influence our life. They are distinctly real. You can think of them as universal, psychic blueprints that govern how we interpret personalities and stories. This explains also why stories and characters can reach so far. Why is Star Wars popular worldwide? Because the essence of the story is so universal. It's so popular because Star Wars very nicely depicts archetypes, which makes it relatable. Luke Skywalker is the typical hero, Yoda the typical sage, Darth Vader the ultimate enemy, the Empire is always the oppressor, and the rebellion is the fight for freedom. These stories relate to people in a very universal way. That's why they are so popular. The same is true for a player like Cristiano Ronaldo. He is arguably the most famous person alive, I think so anyway, and I would argue that he also represents a very universal symbol. Ronaldo is famous for hard work, incredible discipline, and football dominance. He represents a warrior, just like Achilles, who is remembered for famous battles that he won, in the same way that Ronaldo is remembered for amazing moments in important games. However, he also represents this hero's journey. He came up through humble beginnings, worked himself up through struggle and perseverance, and became the hero, became the victor. This is exactly the story arc of a Naruto or Luke Skywalker or other heroes. And no person in our common imagination embodies it as clearly and explicitly as Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think this is how Jung's archetypes are linked to football, and also why Ronaldo is such a powerful icon. It's because he has become the symbol of something that actually reflects something way deeper in our unconscious, which holds the same place as powerful myths and stories. I think this Su is a way of channeling this feeling. It recreates this archetype. And now that you see that archetypes and football are connected, we can actually talk further about how football depicts and plays out these archetypes. Now, arguably the most famous rivalry in football is that of FC Barcelona and Real Madrid. Though it's famous for its recent intensity, El Clasico goes way back. Part of its intensity actually sprouts from a much deeper political conflict. You see, clubs represent people, and Real Madrid represents the royal capital Madrid, home of the Spanish Empire. At the same time, Barcelona represented Catalonia, one of the areas of Spain most rebellious. In Franco's reign, the old dictator of Spain, he tried to suppress alternate cultures and create a single unified Spain. In doing so, he suppressed Barcelona's identity, making FC Barcelona an example for the rest of Spain. In the meantime, Madrid was favored to have a strong club representing a strong and unified country. Still, FC Barcelona survived, and after the coming of Johan Cruyff, arguably football's most disruptive player ever, entered a new golden age. What you see here is that historically speaking, Real Madrid very much represents the established status quo. At the same time, FC Barcelona represent the subversion, the rebellion, the disruption. Very simply put, Real Madrid represents the imperial force, while Barcelona represents the rebellion. In this sense, these clubs embody very specific archetypes. Now, why does this matter? Because now I'm going to show you that this history and the forming of these archetypes actually still influences the way that they play to this day. I mean, just look at Real Madrid's most iconic players. Cristiano Ronaldo, now Mbappe, Zidane, Sergio Ramos, Bellingham, even players like Gareth Bale, who even though he rather plays golf than football, scored probably the most insane final goal of all time.
3 in the box waiting for the cross, and it was Bale! Oh, what about that?
What do these players have in common? They have a very direct style. They're physically dominant and imposing, but at the same time, of course, technically excellent. And because of that combination, they're very dominant. Real Madrid's style of play is very pragmatic. It's doing what they need to do to win, and often is a rather direct, kind of blunt style, which basically screams, try and stop us if you can. It's direct, they want to beat you, and they beat you with overwhelming force. Even their colors, gold and white, are a signal of blatant domination. It's the status quo colors. It befits the club with the most European titles in history. It's also reflected by their notion of the Galacticos, the collection of the best, most dominant players, and just bringing them all together under one team. Loki Modric doesn't really fit with this picture, but he's just really good, and just don't worry about it. On the other hand, FC Barcelona's iconic players paint a very different picture. Players like Messi, now Yamal, Ronaldinho, Iniesta, Puyol, Pedri. Their style of play is of the highest technical level. They beat teams through football intelligence and refined touches. They win challenges not by dominating and just being stronger than the other, but by subverting the challenge, by moving out of the way, by skipping the tackle. They are constantly playing around the opponent. Ultimately, they dominate in the sense that they win, but they do that in a much more indirect way through creativity and unexpected actions. It's also no coincidence that Barcelona changed football not only once. They changed it through Cruyff's arrival, but later also through Guardiola's Barcelona. This is also reflected in the most famous players, many of which are brought in way before they are world class or through the academy. And this reflects not blatant ruling through resources, but economic and being efficient. Barcelona does not beat teams with pure pace, with strength or direct play, but often through finesse, for agility, trickery and high-level technique. Both teams reflect the archetypes of their cities, their history and their culture directly with the players who play for the clubs. Even when you look at them, it still holds up. Ronaldo is tall, he's handsome, he's muscled, he's charismatic, where Messi is a little bit more of a small, a bit of an odd guy, right? It doesn't really scream amazing footballer. Zidane looks like fucking a handsome Squidward, where Puyol and Iniesta look like you could find them drinking beer at 2 in the afternoon at a construction site. Real Madrid is the royal club of dominance and status quo, where FC Barcelona is to suppress people, it's the subversion, it's the disruption. In this sense, these players represent and fit with the club, which fits with the culture, with the history. All the way from the playing style to the culture of the club to the players. And in doing so, they represent archetypes, and actually represent direct opposites of one another. We, being sensitive to archetypes, we observe this, whether we realize this explicitly or not. This is what allows us to identify with a club or a person on a deep level, because the club actually stands for something. It embodies something. And because they embody this deeper, symbolic layer, every time they face each other, they play out these archetypes. El Clasico, Barcelona versus Real Madrid, it's like Aang versus Osai, it's Obi-Wan versus Anakin, it's David versus Goliath, it's subversion and technique against overwhelming power. And it's this battle, mythical battle, played out in the form of a football game. Now you see here in these examples that Real Madrid kind of accords with the evil side in all of the stories that I just mentioned. And this is a bit unfair, but of course these stories, many times the status quo, the most powerful force is seen as the enemy that's disrupted by the hero. I don't want to paint Real Madrid as evil, but it does show how this archetype can very quickly feed into something a bit more sinister, but that's not a topic for now. This is reflected in more than these two clubs. It's even reflected in national teams. I mean, the German team is efficient, it's practical, it's team-oriented, it really fits with the color grey. Italy is pragmatic, it's opportunistic, it's not always the prettiest, but it gets the job done, it's very passionate. All the good things from the French team don't come from France, just like the country itself. Brazil's Jogo Bonito, the beautiful game, it represents Brazil's general love and celebration of life, again reflected in their football team. Each World Cup, each international tournament is a contest of these different ways of being. Their cultures, existences are materialized in this football team and led to play out against each other. But football is slowly losing this deep cultural dimension. I mean, just look at Manchester United. Manchester United is often referred to as the Bees because the Mancunians, the people from Manchester, are referred to as busy bees. They're referred to as busy bees because it's a working city. The culture of the city is to work hard, to grind it out, and to get through on grit. While United was successful under Alex Ferguson, this is also again what the club represented. It was a pragmatic club, it was hard working. It won matches because it wanted it more, because it fought for it more, because it was willing to grind it out. But through commercialization, it has started to stand for prestige and unearned luxury. It's arguably the most disappointing and underperforming club in all of football. And its identity as an organization has become completely detached from its roots. United doesn't anymore stand for grit, it stands for high salaries for lazy players. As such, United doesn't represent its city anymore. It only represents business interest, it represents ownership. Manchester United doesn't fight for the people. It only aims to increase commercialization and increase the amount of football that comes from the supporters into the pockets of the owners. This is where sports goes from culture, where it originated from, to entertainment, which is the American model of sports. And this is not the loss, the crisis is much deeper. If you remember at the start, I talked about how archetypes shape our understanding of the world and ourselves at a deep level, a deep unconscious level. It's not irrelevant, it's a very deep and profound way that we connect to the world. Again, it's why stories, it's why myths, and it's why sports capture our imagination. Archetypes form the basis of these stories. It allows us to connect with stories and personally see ourselves in these stories. That's why when you were a kid, and even low-key now, you would pretend to be Luke Skywalker, or Yoda, or a ninja, or these other people from myths. As football becomes disconnected from culture, it loses its ability to represent and channel archetypes. When that happens, people will lose their identity, they will lose the representation of their culture. This profound interaction of archetypes that made football so important, that makes it matter, it will only remain as an empty spectacle. It will only be the show. It will lose the rooting that made it significant in the first place. The human dimension of sports will be lost, and the epic stories, which write themselves, played out through football, the interactions of archetypes, will become empty. Instead, it only is small-minded people making themselves rich, not caring about the culture, not caring about the representation of football for its people. Major tournaments like the Champions League or international tournaments won't be significant like they were before, because they will lose the connection to ourselves. Football exists because of its supporters. The power of football is not with FIFA, it's not with the ownership of the club, it's with the supporters, it's with us. At least Barcelona and Real Madrid still represent this, as most of the clubs are owned by the season tickets holders, which are also stakeholders in the club. I mean, this is a magnificent model, but this allows you to take back a bit of that ownership. It holds the club responsible to answer to their culture. In Spain, they still live strong. So just look at Athletic Bilbao, which still only fields players born in Basque regions. And they've never ever relegated from the top league. This is a club that represents its people. But the bigger a club becomes, especially in our age, the more and more detached it becomes. And that's what you see more than anything with Manchester United. But you also now see it with teams like Ajax. That's why I wanted to talk about this topic, to show you that these things are important. That they're not irrelevant, that it's not just stupid sports. But that sports touch on something way deeper than that. Especially sports like football or rugby, which really emerged from the culture to represent local peoples, local places. That weren't top-down inventions from entertainment. Where all the clubs are rooted in a history deeply tied to the place where it's from, to the people that it represents. And in playing out these stories, in playing out these archetypes, they matter. Because they are constant conversations about the different ways that you can exist in this world. There are ways of being effective, of winning, of being successful by being dominant or being subversive. By beating a tackle one-on-one, being stronger than someone, or using your smarts to get around the tackle and get through that way. That's what football is. It's the constant battle of these different mentalities. And if we lose that significance, we lose a deep part of our culture, of our representation. And we will lose it because commercialization will eat it up. And that's something that we shouldn't allow to happen, because sports is something that we own, and sportsing is something for us. So next time you see any big sports, but especially football, look at the things that you are seeing with a different eye. See the interactions that are truly happening on this broader level, and think about why it captures the imagination. And then think about what's ruining it now. Especially with the next World Cup being happening in the USA, where there are experts at complete commercialization. There could be two options. One, football as a cultural phenomenon also gets more and more spread in the USA and they start to appreciate the culture for what it is, or 2, it becomes increasingly commercialized and it loses its base with what it really is about. It's gonna be more and more and more about the spectacle, from halftime shows to celebrities attending, and less about the content. The content being this heads-on confrontation between different approaches, between different teams, different countries, different cultures, different ways of being, directly facing each other for the result of winning a football match. I think it will be defining for the direction that football takes. And at the moment it's not looking good, because corporate and corrupt powers are influencing football more and more. And if you love football, or if you just care about your own culture and society, you should also stand up against it. And whenever there's a moment that you can put these organizations down, that you do. That was my random rant about archetypes and football. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, please like this video or leave a comment down below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts or other examples about your local club or about other clubs. Of course, there are a lot of things I could have talked about, but I didn't. I want to keep it a few main examples. That's why I went for El Clasico, because it's so clear. But you can do this with many clubs. Even like Ajax, Feyenoord, or in Italy, there's a lot of clubs that represent a lot of different things. Or Bayern Dortmund, or whatever. And Jung archetype is super annoying, super interesting in general. I think I'm gonna make more videos about it, but I'll see. So yeah, take care, and thanks so much for watching. Ciao. See.